And welcome to the CodeX Cantina, where I am Una.
And you're going really quick crypto tonight.
If you are new to the CodeX Cantina, we take a conversational approach to the stories that we read. Today, we are doing none other than The Great Return to the Wolves of the Calla by Stephen King. It's been a good 6-month break since we were on the Wizard and Glass beam here.
Yeah, I'm excited to return back to our journey towards the tower, and I think we're going to make it a couple years late, but we'll make it.
To be fair, Stephen King took his sweet time even to write the book. So if it took us longer than a year to get through the Dark Tower like we had originally thought, give us some slack, right?
I still think we're ahead of schedule. Even if we took this long to read it, he still wouldn't have written the next book if they weren't already all published. Right?
Exactly. So speaking of published, this book was published in November of 2003, and it was shortly after this that King started pumping out the Songs of Susanna in June 2004, and then the Dark Tower in September 2004. So
that's incredible.
Within a year, released all three. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, because the jump between book 1 and book 2 is like 20 years, right? Something like that, 15 years, if I remember correctly.
So a lot of people like to point to the car accident, pointing out that, King may have been worried about running out of time and not being able to finish this opus that he's been taking his sweet time working in other books along the way. He finally kicks it into high gear, and those numbers 1999 come into play, obviously, with this book as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that near-death experiences alter your perception of life and what's important and what you want to accomplish with your very limited time here.
Now, our first video on this channel was The Gunslinger, literally, and it was horrendous. We learned a lot about production since then. But
we ripped into that video already.
But as a result, we also have 2,100 more subscribers on the journey with us. So let's just do a quick little trigger warning that this series has assault on both men and women. It uses the N-word heavily. There's talks about whether to continue forward with a pregnancy or not. And much like King's writing, he rips into the Bible and religion constantly. So not a series for everyone, right?
Yeah, some very heavy stuff here in this book, although I think that he's very tasteful in a lot of the ways that he does this, but he's very descriptive in some of the parts where he uses some violence and brings up, religion and the way that he kind of bashes on it in his King-esque way.
Yeah. All right, so for table of contents, what are we doing today? Let's cover what is in this book. We got to talk about the pronunciation of Calla. That seems to be a hot button for some people. This is my jam. All right, we are going into the intertextuality between this and Seven Samurai. That's going to be hot. We're going to do a quick plot recap where I think I'm going to be able to boil this down. The shortest recap possible. World first 2-sentence recap of the plot of this. We're gonna do.
Wait, isn't this book 713 pages?
I got 2 sentences for you. Wait till we get there, okay? We're gonna go into we're going into character work, the good, bad, and the ugly. A little fun play on words there, along with the characters. We're gonna talk about frame narrative in Salem's Lot 2, and we're gonna talk about consciousness of this novel. So we got a good story planned for today.
All right, I'm excited. A lot of good stuff here. Let's try to keep it under 3 hours.
All right, so what is this book? I would argue this. We've had these character moments with Eddie, where we got to see him and his brother. We saw Susanna come of Odetta and Detta. And we've seen kind of some moments of Jake along the way, but I would argue this is probably Jake's book, where we finally see Jake kind of become a man through this book.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We've seen a lot of character development for Roland growing as a person, Eddie growing as a person, Susanna growing as a person, and now we finally see Jake come into his own as more of a key character in the quartet.
And interestingly enough, we don't get the point of view of the town much in this one. Did you notice that? We kind of start off with T and Jaffords, then we flip over to the quartet and Callahan for most of it, and it's only kind of at the very end we get a little bit more of the town. I thought the point of view was interesting for this book.
Yeah, he does kind of jump back, because in the very beginning, I was listening to it, it's a good solid hour plus that you're with Tien and his family and everything, and it doesn't give you much context to start the story off either. You're very confused in the beginning of what's going on. So it was weird how he flipped quickly to the quartet and then never comes back to, looking at from Tuk's point of view or, any other's point of view of the actual side characters.
Yeah, I'll say that's a good point. We took, 5-month, 6-month break from the series. Jumping into this, I felt like, did I forget something really important? Where are we? What is going on? It took me a little bit to orient myself with this book, but not necessarily in a bad way. But I definitely second guessed myself that the lack of context in the beginning, I'm like, am I forgetting something that was really important at the end of book 4? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, and book 4 ends, so abruptly there. You're kind of just left out in the open of what's going to happen to them and where they're going as they're traveling down the highway. Roland's finished his story, and you pick up here and you're unsure what's going on, especially when they throw you these brand new characters and you're not sure what's going on as Tien is, beating this huge woman for some reason. And you're like, whoa, what's going on here? So it does take a little bit of adjustment too, but I think that is something that even King himself might struggle with, because it could be years in between, especially after his accident, that he's come back to start writing this novel.
Okay, so we jump into this town in the story. Caliburn Sturgis, I think is how my audiobook narrator pronounced it. Now, I've noticed that there's some contention online about how to pronounce Calla. We have this quote from the book. I mean, these don't even sound the same. And she pronounced them. Calla with the tongue up, making the broad A sound. Callahan with the tongue down, making a much sharper A sound. And Calla's Spanish in our world.
I'm just glad that I don't struggle with the Calla pronunciation, because otherwise I would have been completely confused of why this matters at all. So thank you, high school Spanish.
I honestly would have been guessing that this was Calla just looking at it, but once the audiobook narrator just said Calla, Calla, Calla over and over again, it's Calla in my head. So to me, I almost want to call it Calla, but I think for the purpose of this conversation, we're just going to go with Calla throughout this talk. Is that fair?
No, 100%. I'm fine with that. My question to you is, what's the payoff for this? Is it just one of those word games that King is playing with us because he's the greatest wordsmith ever?
Well, I don't know about the greatest wordsmith ever. I enjoy his wordplay, but Calla, if you didn't know, it means to be calm in Spanish.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a little play on words too, because if you think about the town, while it's anything but quiet, their disposition is they're having, their children are being ripped and stolen from them year after year, and they just kind of take it. These wolves come and just take what they want from the town, and they just accept the status quo. They are kind of being calm in what would ultimately be a very, very enraging situation that I kind of took it as kind of a small play on words with that.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I just going to blow my own mind here. What if it's the calm before the storm?
It's the song of Susanna. It should be the storm of Susanna, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have that the robot gives them the 30 days warning, and you have the calm before the violence is going to occur with the kidnapping of the children.
Oh, yeah. So let's jump into this violence, because in terms of intertextuality, Stephen King, he pulls no punches when it comes to referencing other medium in this. And I love that about Stephen King. I love that about writing. When books have a conversation with plot lines or major characters from the past, it's very engaging, because sometimes it can add on to the lore. Sometimes it can kind of look at it from a different angle. And it's kind of interesting. He kind of gives it to you in the afterward, right? Like it beats you over the head that this is a Western, right? We have no technology. We have the 6 shooters, right? But in the very end, he talks about how this is kind of a reference to a Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
No, it very much feels like that storyline verbatim, just kind of bloated in areas where it's the small town that can't do something. It has the bad guys coming in, and they're all just poor farmers and can't defend themselves, and they're going to hire the bounty hunters to protect them. And we've seen this in Star Wars, and we've seen it, remade into other things, the Magnificent Seven, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so this is totally that storyline.
Well, and then sometimes it's even less obvious, like Disney's A Bug's Life. Can you name anything else with it?
Yeah, Mandalorian just did that with Dallas Bryce Howard's episode, where they have the Mandalorian come in and help the farmers. It's very few people, and you have the little training montage, and you kind of get the same thing here and here. You can imagine the little training montage with throwing the plates and everything, and them all gearing up and hiding the kids. It's the exact same thing that happened in the Mandalorian.
Well, what I really like about this is people love to talk about the 19, the 99 in this, like his number play. But I think they missed the 7, because Magnificent Seven, right? Seven samurai. It's a very important number. And you have quotes in this book where he says, Roland ignored him. He turned toward his little band of fighters. They would be 7 in all. It's a good number, he told himself, a number of power. And if you're really paying attention throughout this book, do you remember what the name of Overholser's farm was?
7 Ranch or something like that?
It was 7 Mile Farm.
7 Mile Farm.
Do you remember how tall Andy was?
Yeah, he's 7 feet tall. I remember that.
And then in New York, how many minutes did they accidentally just let slip by?
I'm guessing it's 7, but I thought it was like 5.
It was 7 minutes at one part. And, I mean, there's a couple of parts where it was, and it changes.
Oh, yeah, it's Susanna loses, I think, like 5 minutes, but when they're all together, they lose 7 minutes. That's right.
And then when they go back to the year, they go back to the year 1977.
1977.
Right.
Yeah.
How many other Callas were there?
There were dozens, weren't there? Because they name off like 20.
They say 70 at one point.
Okay.
And then,
yeah, because I mean, they were like, Calla this, Calla this, Calla that, Calla that.
Well, and then even Callahan, when he was traveling about, it was 7 years before he got restless and decided to, when he was uneasy in Lowell.
Yeah. I guess just because he berates you so much with 19, and Eddie is just 19ing this whole book to death that you can lose the subtle nuances of other numbers.
Well, and the 19's given to you. I like when you can pull out some of those hidden things, like the references to 7 being so important to the 7 samurai. A quote from Kurosawa himself. Good Westerns are liked by everyone, said Kurosawa on one occasion. Since humans are weak, they want to see good people and great heroes. And we see this manifested in several ways, right? With the way the kata come in, they're being set up in the traditional Western grammar of being the heroes to come in and save the town. But is it really they're saving the town? And that's maybe where I find a little bit of a difference, where usually it's the heroes pull out the best part of the townspeople, right? They teach them how to set the traps. They teach them how to train. And it's in those moments when, well, I guess when we're going to talk about resourcefulness, we're going to have to talk about these plates, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be resourceful, meaning we got to choose weapons. Plates?
Who throws a plate?
Honestly,
who throws a shoe? That's all I could think of when they brought this. When I remember, because I completely forgot about this. Because again, I've read it before, so this is my second go through, and I completely forgot about the plate thing, and I just cracked myself up with the shoe thing.
Well, it's very surreal, but I take it as it was supposed to be a nod to this is King's attempt to make the town the heroes. We're training the town to do these traps, to fight their battle. We're helping them. We know we have the know-how, but we need their help, and they need to be the heroes. This is their absurd weapon, right? This is what's this is the beginning of surrealism. We've seen some just really strange one-off things, these riddle battles and stuff through the Dark Tower. King, he takes the surreal throttle and just cranks it up to 10 for this one. This is where the Wolves of the Calla is where we really leave realism behind.
For sure. I think this is kind of the David and Goliath story a little bit too, right? You have the little guys triumphing over the big by using, their slingshot and not just brute force like the wolves.
If there's one thing that I wish that I had more of at this moment, it was more of the town. We spent so much time in this middle part with Callahan, with the quartet. We started off with T and Jeffords, and then we just kind of leave them, and we never really develop the town members as much as I would have wanted. I'll put it this way. This was, a 750-ish page book. I would love to have subtracted some things. What I would have added would have been more time with these town members and making them more memorable, because I would say that they're good characters, they're interesting characters, but they're not the most memorable characters.
100% agree. One of my favorite parts of the whole book is when old Pear is telling Eddie the story of when he was a young man and how they killed one of the wolves. Mm-hmm. I love that scene. I mean, not only is it, a great little action scene, but you also get that, you get a little bit more about these people's character and a little bit more about the steely reserve in them, that they're not just pushover farmers, and that, while they're, a little bit afraid to stand up to the wolves because they think maybe even more retribution will come back to them, I think that you do get that these people have been contemplating trying to stand up for the wolves for generations, and that they had one successful attempt. Why didn't they do it again? And I think that it shows a little bit more background, and I love that scene, and I wish we'd had more of that, of more development of these characters when they were younger, or what happened through these generations. Why is it this way?
Yeah. To me, it comes back to the Calla and them being quiet and ultimately accepting their fate. They still lost that flashback in a sense. Like they won a battle, but they lost the war, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I guess it's a taste of victory, but ultimately a loss overall because all the children were still taken.
All right, let's do the plot recap. The ultimate effort in reductionism here. Are you ready?
700 and some pages down to 2 sentences.
Hear me out.
Good luck, sir.
Hear me out on this, okay? So what I'm going to throw out is I'm going to throw out character moments, right? We're going to talk about characters in the next section, the good, the bad, and the ugly, okay? In terms of plot, what I'm taking to mean plot, I mean, if I step back and I look at the Dark Tower, what are the things that are pushing us forward in this plot to get to the Dark Tower or to get to the Crimson King? I'm not talking about things that we learn about the Crimson King. I'm not talking about things about Jake, growing as a man. I'm just talking about things that serve pushing this plot forward, okay?
Okay, so the overall narrative, no side quests.
Yep. Okay, so
all right.
The plot reduction of this book is the quartet obtain Father Callahan, who has Black 13. A new personality, Mia, develops from Susanna to protect her demon child and runs away with Black 13. End plot.
I want to say you're wrong and that you missed a lot, but that's pretty good of the overall arcing pushing us towards the Dark Tower.
That is in the grand scheme of things. So if we forgot to mention this at the top, I've never read Wolves of the Calla, I've never read Song of Susanna, and I've never read the Dark Tower. So I have no clue what was going to happen when I was reading this. So I still don't know, right? But in the grand scheme of things, the only thing they did was they got Black 13 and then Susanna ran off with it. Not like all of this stuff that happens with Father Callahan, with the vampire, like when they were doing this Father Callahan backstory, I don't know if you can remember how you felt the first time you did it, but I'm like, is this just like a really long backstory to tell me that the wolves are vampires? Like, like this is a lot of effort just to do that. And then when we got done and the wolves were doom bots, I'm like, what was the point of the Father Callahan thing? Just so that he could join the crew? Like, you don't need the vampire thing to have him join the crew. Like what was the point of that? We'll go more into that. We'll get more into that. Let's first talk about the characters before we do that. And then we'll end with characters with Callahan and go into this Salem Slot 2 thing. All
right, that sounds good.
So first, one of the things why I call this section the good, the bad, and the ugly. Have you seen that movie, first of all?
This other one with Clint Eastwood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where they have the three-way showdown at the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
So what made that story so interesting was not only for what it was, but what it was not, what it was a critique of. Because there was Hollywood Westerns at the time, which were beautiful. There was tons of plot. There was witty, charismatic characters that could just come up with these one-liners and can, just really razzle-dazzle you, right?
Everything was John Wayne.
Everything.
Yeah.
Along came the spaghetti Western, right? These were the Italian, dirty, gritty characters that would say more with their actions than their words, right? Because that was one of the critiques, was that there's too much words in the Hollywood Western. And what I like...
Yeah, and a lot of the Italian spaghetti Westerns, the actors didn't speak English, and they're trying to get to a larger audience and market, so they wrote them very, very simple scripts.
Oh, and the ADR was it was so bad. Like when I watch some of them today, and just
they're awful.
There's like no attempt to match up the voice acting with. Yeah, it's horrendous. So we have a lot of character work instead in spaghetti Westerns, and I would argue that's what we get instead of plot. The whole purpose of this, I'm going to call it a side quest. I'm going to call it filler. I don't care what narrative you want to put on it. This whole side part was just to drive the characters further into themselves. And I think the biggest thing that I want to talk about is Jake, right? Because this whole time he's just been very nervous. He's afraid to ask for things. And you have that little moment when he's like, "Can I go play with Benny?" And Roland's just like, I don't know if that's a good idea. Is that something that you want? And it's kind of Jake making decisions for himself for the first time.
Yeah, we see Jake growing up, and I think that the world has pushed Jake to grow up a little bit, and he's seeing all of the world kind of for the first time as he's seeing the interactions between these adults. And I think Jake is seeing how Eddie is dealing with things, and I think he's seeing how Suzanne is dealing with it. And I think that he's seeing, for the very first time, he knows Roland has faults because Roland let him die in the first book. But I think ultimately he's finally coming to terms with that. They can still be good people. I mean, Eddie overcame his drug addiction. Susanna has overcome her split personalities, and that Roland can overcome these things that maybe the mistakes that he's made, he can overcome and grow into a man as well.
I also like when they won the battle, they let Jake just kind of smoke this. He smokes at the end, kind of like the signal of him being a man. But that plays into the Western kind of like image of the guy smoking the cigar being the man and stuff like that. Jake had that moment where he was throwing the plates up in the air and pressing the town. He had his coming of Quartet age in the story.
Oh, for sure. It's like, I'm done now, so I get my smoke.
I liked the Cave of Destiny, a.k.a. what did they call it in this one?
Well, it's the Cave of the Door.
We're just going to call it the Cave of Destiny. It's the Star Wars Cave of Destiny from Dagobah.
Yep. Yeah, all your fears or your inner turmoil is going to be exposed by the Cave of Voices. I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
What I liked about it, too, is I think, if I remember correctly, I think they talked about flashy sticks first, then they talk about this cave. And I'm like, wait a minute. Is this the Dagobah Cave of Destiny? Like, is You've Forgotten the Face of Your Father just one really long play to ultimately be a joke about Darth Vader and not seeing him behind the mask? Like where are you going with this, Stephen King?
Yeah, and it's really obvious when you go into the last, I think it's part 3, and you have Eddie go in there, who is like Luke Skywalker, and then you have Roland go in, who's like Yoda, and he's like, no, I can't go with you. I have to stay here. Just like Yoda's like, no, you only can take with you what you need. And, then Eddie goes to the door and has kind of his own little adventure, saving Calvin Tower. So, yeah, very, very reminiscent of that, too. It's kind of cool how he pulls all this stuff together.
And just a lot of what has traditionally been morally gray characters, that's what you're getting with this one. So this is kind of like, I think this is a really big love letter to the spaghetti Western from Stephen King.
Yeah, I felt this one was a lot more serious, too. I know spaghetti Westerns are sometimes seen as kind of like slapstick compared to the old glory days of Westerns, but this one is very, very serious. It's not as funny as some of the other books. It doesn't have as much comedy as you see these characters kind of become more ingrained in this, protection of this town as children's lives are at stake.
All right, let's move into frame narratives and the Salem's Lot 2. Okay, I know we've been wanting to get into this. So let me start off with describing what a frame narrative. Do you know what a frame narrative is?
Teach me, Obi-Wan.
It's a story within a story, to put it super barbarically, okay? But sometimes it allows you can view a flashback as kind of like a frame within a frame. But think of Inception, okay? They kept going in a step deeper and they enter this whole different world. Or think about even just Lord of the Rings in general with Silmarillion and all these other things. Those are actually frame narratives where they're actually stories wrapped up and presented. And a lot of times they give you information about the bigger picture, about the either the going on string of narratives, or the information you get in this flashback, or the information that you get in this framed story gives you information and context about the other one. Like, oh, that's why the Grinch is such a jerk, because, of this thing happening to him. That's called a frame narrative when you have a story within a story, okay?
So like flashbacks.
It is like flashbacks, but usually it's meant, the flashback is meant to tell and illuminate most commonly something about a character. But it could also give you information of, oh, there was this huge nuclear war. That's why this world is so cold, right? It's meant to give you information about the parent story when you go into it, right?
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
So we have what is ultimately a very large frame narrative happening in this with the Father Callahan and Salem's Lot too. Now, I'm someone who's never read Salem's Lot. I know you have, right?
Yes, sir. Many years ago, though.
And do you think you need to have read Salem's Lot for this book?
I don't think so, but I think that it is confusing of why you're getting all of Callahan's backstory, as there is no payoff in the end. I do have kind of a theory on this, and we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, it's very strange to me. It reminds me almost even a little bit, we've been talking so much about Lord of the Rings throughout this whole thing, and we talked about how that actually is a huge frame narrative too. When you watch the movies and you see the Battle of Isengard, right? And you flip back and forth between, the battle with Gandalf and Sauron and then the battle at Helm's Deep and stuff like that. You have these tensions that are happening with the characters. Well, when we jump into the actual book itself, the entire battle is actually not split. It's not dual stories. It's you finish one plot and then the other characters meet up with them and they're like, oh, okay, so this is what happened at the battle. But as a result of that, you lose a lot of tension. You lose a lot of the present tense action and movement when it's just kind of like this is what happened. And I think that was a little bit of a mistake on Tolkien's hands, where by presenting it as this is something that just happened and you already know the outcome of these characters, it's going to lose some audience members, okay? And the problem is when he does that flashback and he just tells it in past tense kind of like that, it doesn't bring you into it, and it also doesn't illuminate anything other than just plot of we won, this is what's kind of happening barbarically. There's other things that happened into it. I'm not trashing it, but I'm just saying I view that as a little bit of a mistake. I'm looking at this, and I don't know much about Salem's Lot, so I don't know if this was like a retcon. I don't know if this was he wasn't done with the characters and he just wanted to write a sequel, but he didn't know what to do with the sequel, so he put it in this book. But I don't see any connection really, other than like, here's Father Callahan's backstory, but it doesn't really enrich his character. It just is his character. And it doesn't enrich this plot line of the Doombots and lightsabers and stuff like that. It's completely separated, that it's entirely filler, and I don't think it's the best done flashback to explain what happened to Father Callahan. I liked it, but it felt clunky and probably could have been tightened up a little bit.
I think if there could have been some payoff for it, like if they didn't know why they went Todash and they didn't know that he had Black 13 and he tells this whole story and then he finally like pulls it out and reveals it to them, that, he's telling this story basically to tell them how he got Black 13, right? And they already know he has Black 13. We know he has Black 13.
The whole time,
and so it's like,
yeah.
Yeah, the whole time. So it's like, he's like, hey, let me tell you how I got Black 13. And it's just like, no, dude, you got it. Okay, we're going to use it, because we need to time travel, because we need to save the Rose. So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. So I think that what he's done here with Callahan is I think that he loves this character and he didn't like what he did to him in Salem's Lot. Kind of spoilers for that book. He gets his butt kicked by a vampire.
Spoilers. I mean, they tell you in Wolves of the Calla that's what happens to him. Like there's no suspense.
Yeah, they tell you in this book as well. But I think that he's doing like he did with Holly Gibney, right? He loved that character. Other people loved that character. And so he wrote books specifically for her. And I think he kind of nailed it on the head, is that he didn't know how to write Salem Lot 2 since Callahan has been already defeated and he's kind of always got his butt kicked by vampires, right? I mean, he kills a few of like the level 3s, but anytime he goes up against level 2s or 1s, he gets his butt kicked. So I think that he was trying to give, a swan song to Callahan's character, because I think he really, really liked his character and he was mad at himself for what he did to him in Salem's Lot.
I just wish, like how he could see the aura of the level 3, like they were glowing blue or something like that. I just wish that something from that plot should have came forward for that final battle. Whether it be the characters learned how to see a weakness or something like that. It should have been tied together more to make me feel like it should have been connected there better, I guess.
Yeah, I wish the traitor would have been a vampire. I think that would have been really cool if like they were hiding it, and like, because his power I don't think works right now. And I think that if his power like kicked on in the heat of the battle, then he would have seen Benny's dad and been like, oh my God, he's a vampire. He's a traitor. Like he has to be evil if he's a vampire. And I think that would have been a cool little plot twist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, you could have nixed 200 pages and, put in 100 extra pages, or whatever, vice versa, of some more backstory on the characters from the town, like we said before.
Well, and it's one of those things, I liked it. Like, it was entertaining to me. I by no means am like, I hated this, it should be cut. When I say this, it's just, it was superfluous for what this plot accomplished. It just, I would love to have seen that effort be more focused, I guess.
Agreed.
All right, so let's move into the consciousness of the novel. When we say that, the question is, what does the novel know? What do the characters know? And it doesn't necessarily mean the narrator. Like, narrator omniscience and knowledge is much different than when you say the consciousness of the novel. It's what's real, what's tangible, what is possible within this novel, right? So here we're starting to see that the world is breaking down, right? We have these multiple universes just breaking. We have characters that are dying and then coming back to life. I'm not 100% sure exactly what's happening there still, but I kind of attribute it to, have you ever followed like DC Comics or Marvel? They'll have, Batman, and he's the Batman that's got this backstory and he's met these characters. And then a different author will come along and they'll just scrap everything, right? It'll be a different universe where this Batman actually has this background and they've met the same characters, but the characters are different in this way. So you've got Batman 1 and then Batman 2, right? And then you'll have so many Batmans based on how many authors reinvent this character. Well, eventually...
So the multiverse.
So DC eventually comes along with the Crisis of Infinite Earths, and then they smash them together. All the Batmans meet, and you had Into the Spider-Verse recently released. Well, I say recently, but it was in theaters, relatively recent that it's on, the pop culture's, awareness, right? Well, the wikis did this thing where they labeled this characters. Like, this is Spider-Man from Earth 616. This is Spider-Man from 19999. Like, they literally give these universes different numbers because the consciousness of those characters is different, right? In their world, they've never met these other worlds. Like, they've had different experiences. It seems to me like King is almost kind of flirting with that idea of we have his super flu from Trip in Wizard and Glass. We had Salem's Lot, right? That's this universe. And now that universe is getting smashed together with this Dark Tower universe. Like the walls of the realities are breaking down. And he found that Salem's Lot book at the end. And it's like, oh, that's from Stephen King Universe 2. We're in Dark Tower, which is Stephen King Universe 1. And Jake here, he died earlier in Dark Tower, Universe 3. It seems to me like we're having these parallel worlds just kind of smashed together. And I know you can't talk too much about this, right? You're Mr. I've read it, so I know what's going to happen, right? But I'm just postulating here that I'm going to go back to my conversation that we had in Wizard and Glass about Ka and God.
Okay.
So to me, the consciousness of these different universes is starting to meld together. And I'm starting to wonder, one of the things I talked about is Ka. What is this design? What is the intelligent design behind the Dark Tower universe? And we're seeing, what would we see in this one? We saw Marvel, okay, with the Doombots, which at the time when he wrote this wasn't owned by Disney, okay? You have Star Wars, which, again, everything's kind of getting bought up, right?
Yeah, everything owned by Disney now.
But at the time that this was written, these were all different universes, right? These are just things that Stephen King liked that he's just throwing into there. He likes Salem's Lot, so he threw it in there. He liked Star Wars and the Cave of Destiny, so he threw it in there. He likes Marvel, so he's throwing Doombots in there. It's kind of reminiscent to me of, do you remember so you spoke of Holly Gibney from If It Bleeds, right? How he wanted to write her story in that. You remember that story,
Yep.
The Life of Chuck, where you had all these characters in a person's mind?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a cool concept. So it's kind of the same thing here.
I'm kind of worried that that's where this story is going, and like in terms of frame consciousness. Originally I said the god of this world is dying. What if the person whose head that we're in, kind of like Life of Chuck, it just feels like a ripoff. So I can't imagine it's the exact same thing. Like Stephen King, why are you doing the same thing twice? But
yeah,
are we in God's, whoever the God's head is, which is all the stuff Stephen King likes, basically, is that character dying, and all of these memories are starting to meld together, and that's kind of like what the Dark Tower represents, is the death of a person. And maybe that's why we have all those references to like 1999, right? His car accident when he had a close brush and thought he was going to die with death. Here he is having all of these experiences meld together, this near to life death experience. It's kind of it's how I feel this is going.
Without spoiling anything, I think that at some point King realized, holy crap, I've written a lot of books and they kind of all connect together. And maybe he had this idea all along. And I think that he's just continuing that idea of creating his own multiverse. And I think that he still does that today. And even in this book, they reference, 11/21/63, with the assassination of Kennedy and that whole book and stuff. And they say, I can't go back and save Kennedy, that might have terrible consequences. And so he's even referencing his own books inside of this book. And that book he hadn't even written yet, but he does go eventually and write that. Yeah. So,
well, he's talked about how he's had ideas and he doesn't have a notebook because he's worried that that'll be a graveyard for bad ideas. Like if it's a good idea, it'll just come back and come out of you. It could be like 11, whatever the numbers are, 63. That could have just been a story that he just kept coming back to, and eventually it started to write itself, if you will.
Yeah, he seems to be all over the place sometimes in these books, and that's unfortunate because, don't get me wrong, I love this book. It sometimes his ideas feel a little bit misplaced.
I don't know. My criticism also comes from a place of love. Like I really did like this book a lot. I enjoyed it. So anytime I'm criticizing it, I hope it's taken I hope you realize we're heading towards a very positive direction for me. I really, really like it. I'm concerned that it's just going to be someone's telling this story and we're in someone's head. Like that's going to be dumb to me. I don't like that plot line personally.
Yeah, you don't like the ending. Well, I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but that King has even made fun of himself about that he is the worst writer when ending a story.
That's a fair point. All right, let's move into our ratings and wrap up here. If you are new, feel free to check out the playlist for the rest of the Dark Tower series again. Again, the beginning's kind of rough if you're one of our new friends here on subscribing to us. But we'll plan to kind of do a new kickoff once we finish the story. We'll kind of do a better guide into the story as we've now been doing this for much longer. We're a little bit more adept at where we want to go with this. So, Crypto, what are you going to do for ratings for this?
So I think for this one, I want to give it just a pleasure for enjoyment only. No analytical. We didn't go too much into that. And there's probably some stuff that we could have, but we read this one more just for fun. And I think that I want to give this one a solid B+, 8.5-ish. I really like this book, even with the bloat with Callahan. I loved Jake's story. I loved, even though Eddie wasn't as funny, I really liked, him growing up as well. I mean, he basically, like when he saves Calvin Tower and the guy's like, man, this guy's a gunslinger. He's a bad dude. And I like kind of where they're going with Susanna, and the plates was just kind of hilarious. And then all the pop culture references before Ready Player One, he was even written, throwing all that stuff in. It's a good ride. It's a fun side quest. Like if this was a game and I was watching you play, I'd be like, oh, no, you got to go over there and do that side quest. It's really fun. You're going to love the final boss. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that, you're going to enjoy this one. You really are. Especially, if you were kind of, down on book 4, Wizard and Glass. I
agree. I'm going to go with an 8.5 as well. I think this is one of those stories too that you can lose people that aren't into surrealism. You're not going to like it. It just gets a little zany, and I loved it. It was such a fun ride, but I can see how when he takes that right turn at Marvel and Star Wars and Doom, you're going to lose some people. And that's okay. I'm here for that wild, zany ride. We've had a lot of crazy stuff happening. I mean, I think most of the people that are, absolutely can't stand surrealism, we lost them at that riddling train, right? Like they're not, they didn't make it past that. We're probably losing just a small more fraction of his audience with this, of just like, this is silly if you're not into that sort of thing. But it's clear after this book, if you hadn't already ejected, I doubt after this book, I don't think there's many more people to eject and not finish book 6 and 7. Like, you have to at least be with the ride at this point in time.
Yeah, you're 4,000 pages or something in. You've gone this far. Why not just finish the journey? And we didn't even talk about, the death sneeches in Harry Potter.
Oh,
we didn't even mention that as well.
Yeah, maybe that was by design. I don't know. All right, guys. Thank you so much for checking out the video today. Again, please check out the playlist and subscribe button, all that fun stuff. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We would love to have you along on that ride. Please hit the subscribe button. Una out.
Peace.